I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're starting tonight with a focus on a pretty simple right. It's the right to use the sidewalk. It doesn't seem like a big deal until you're disabled, and then it's a very big deal, especially if there's something like a tent blocking your path. And that has been a common occurrence in Portland, but that is apparently about to change, which makes it our big story. The city of Portland has settled a federal lawsuit by agreeing to keep sidewalks clear of tents and other campsites. It was filed as a class action suit last September on behalf of several people who have disabilities. They argued the city broke the Americans with Disabilities Act by allowing tents to block the sidewalks. Under the settlement, the city is required to do a bunch of things. It will prioritize the removal of campsites that block sidewalks. It will ensure for a 5-year period that 40% of all campsite removals each year are dedicated to keeping those sidewalks clear. It establishes a 24-hour reporting hotline for anyone to report sidewalks that are blocked. It requires either a city staffer or contractor to check out reported campsites within 5 days of that report. It also does more. It sets up a tracking system and a database that you can use to check on reports of campsites and see if there was any action taken. It also extends a ban on city employees and contractors handing out tents and tarps, with some limited exceptions. And it also is a promise to spend at least $8 million on campsite removal over the next year and remove at least 500 campsites. And by the way, the settlement says that the city will also pay each plaintiff $5,000. Now, that settlement is all pending city council approval, and it's something they plan to discuss next Wednesday. At that same meeting, and apart from the settlement, Mayor Ted Wheeler is going to propose a new city law to ban camping on sidewalks. And this is something we told you about, tipped you off to last week. The mayor's office is calling it a time, place, and manner ordinance to ban all camping on public right-of-ways from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It would also ban camping anytime in parks, on sidewalk areas intended for pedestrians, areas near construction sites, schools, daycares, existing shelters, and high crash corridors. Wheeler's office says the ordinance would make the city more livable for everyone, as well as keep Portland in compliance with a state law passed in 2021 that requires all cities in the state to update camping ordinances by July of this year. If the camping ban passes, it would take effect on July 1st. Although city staff says enforcement by Portland police would be phased in with lots of outreach and more shelter options eventually coming. So, how exactly would this be enforced, you asked? Well, good question, and we have the answer. There would be 2 written warnings, and then the third violation would be punishable by a fine of up to $100 and or 30 days in jail. And by the way, people could only get 1 written warning per day, so you couldn't get tossed in jail on the first day of your warning if you're following along. Again, City Council will take up the ordinance in 6 days. We'll be watching. And by the way, here's my opinion on this. Man, I hope this is real. I hope this is the thing that finally gives the sidewalks all over the city back to the people, all of the people, not just the unhoused. At the same time, I have to admit I'm a tad bit skeptical. It's a lot easier to pass an ordinance or proclaim a change than to actually do the hard work to follow through and make it happen. We've heard more than a few emergency declarations and promises that things will be cleaned up, and it never seems to work out that way. So let's hope this is the beginning of something new. I really do hope it is. What's your take on this? Are you hopeful as well? Or is this just one more promise that goes nowhere? Send me an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. We've been paying a lot of attention to state government this past few months because of the long session that's now stalled in the legislature because of the Republican walkout. But there's another state agency that's also been in the spotlight. It's the OLCC, the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission. They're the agency that regulates Oregon's alcohol and marijuana industries. And they've seen their share of headlines this year, starting with Bourbon Gate, when the Oregonian found out that the OLCC leaders were diverting rare bottles of bourbon for their own use. Governor Tina Kotek requested that the agency's executive director, Steve Marks, step down after she took office, and he did resign right in the middle of the bourbon scandal. And she replaced him with Craig Prinz, who's now serving as the interim director. Later, Oregon's cannabis industry made headlines surrounding marijuana chain La Mota and their taxes. Specifically, that they're not paying them. Willamette Week first broke that story. They found out that the State Department of Revenue and Federal Internal Revenue Service have filed more than $7 million in liens against LaModa's owners. They filed on Rosa Cazares and Aaron Mitchell and the companies they control for failing to pay their taxes. They were also behind on a lot of bills to their vendors, while at the same time donating buckets of money to state Democrats. The politicians who got the money include Governor Tina Kotek when she was running for office and Secretary of State Shemia Fagan. Fagan resigned her office after Willamette Week found out she was actually also working for LaModa on the side. Kotek said she'd donate the money that LaModa gave to her campaign to charity after news about Fagan's involvement came to light. And last week she ordered a crackdown on cannabis businesses who are behind on their taxes. The governor is ordering the OLCC and the Department of Revenue to require anyone who wants to get a retail cannabis license to prove that they're current on their taxes or at least have a payment plan. If they're not, they will not get that marijuana license. Data from the Department of Revenue shows that about 9% of the cannabis taxes for the last fiscal year have gone uncollected. That equals nearly $19 million. Other tax programs under the OLCC are only missing around 3% of expected revenue. So yeah, big difference. If a business is not paying their taxes, they can set up a payment plan with the Department of Revenue, and that would bring them back into compliance and allow them to renew their license. But the percentage of cannabis retailers who are behind on taxes that are actually on a payment plan, it's not very much. It's only 1 in 10. So for some background, in 2021, Oregon recreational cannabis sales hit a record high of $1.18 billion. Yes, it is huge business in Oregon. And it generated $311 million in tax money during the 2019-21 biennium. Across the country, marijuana is big business too. There are only 3 states where marijuana is fully legal. And the total nationwide impact from cannabis sales in 2022 alone expected to reach $99 billion. By 2026, it's expected to grow to upwards of $155 billion. That's according to the trade publication MJ Biz Daily. But a local business lawyer representing cannabis businesses says many are struggling in Oregon. Vince Slawowski with the law firm Harris Bricken says even though it's such a big industry, it's competitive and prices are as low as they've ever been in this market. Businesses are still facing lots of challenges because marijuana is still illegal on the federal level. He said for some, it's affecting their ability to pay their taxes.
And I think what happens a lot there is people just tend to not do a good job of not commingling money, right? So they'll do a simple sale, say it's a $20 sale, 3 of those dollars are the state's dollars, but they won't set it aside, right? They're kind of in a lean spot anyway. They could use that money anyway. They've been almost using it like a loan, a lot of them, and they just have been in arrears on taxes. And the issue was highlighted by one sort of spectacular tax non-compliance incident of this LaModa chain, which has been in the news a lot. And I can't remember how far in arrears they were, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And going back to 2016, and Governor Kotek got fed up with that, and she issued a directive to the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission and said, I want a rule in place such that you guys are not issuing licenses to people that are out of compliance with respect to their tax obligations.
And before we go on, let me just correct something that I said accidentally wrong a little bit ago about the number of states where it's fully legal. What I meant to say is there's only 4 states in the country where it's illegal. It is legal everywhere else. All right. The Department of Revenue says they've actually been discussing this issue for several years now, but they didn't get anything done until just recently. They say the reporting on LaModa did make the issue a lot more public. But remember, the OLCC just got a new leader. Here he is.
With me coming in, it's a new opportunity, new leadership. I have a new chair. So, I think we wanted to work with DOR once we realized that this was possible through our existing rulemaking. We really felt like we could take action. And so I think that's part of why I'm here, frankly, is to look at things with new eyes.
OLCC says they're still working out the process that licensees are going to have to follow. They'll introduce a temporary rule at their next meeting on June 15th and then work on a permanent rule with input from people in the industry later this fall. Moving on. During last night's show, we brought you a special report on long COVID. It's a very real condition that's affecting something like 15 million Americans and maybe as many as 240,000 Oregonians. That's a lot of folks. Some brand new research into long COVID was just published today that will help us answer a question that you mailed in last night. Wendy wrote in, "I was waiting to hear if they knew why some people get long COVID and others don't." The straight answer is no, they don't know. But they are making discoveries on a path toward an answer there. A new study from the University of Washington School of Medicine, again just published today, identified the 12 most common symptoms of long COVID. More on those in a moment. But the study also found that there were certain factors that appear to make people more likely to develop severe cases of long COVID. Here's what they are. People who were not vaccinated, those who were infected with COVID multiple times, or people who had their infection before the 2021 Omicron variant surge. And it's worth noting this was not a small sample size. They looked at more than 9,700 people. About 8,600 of those people had COVID at least 6 months before, and 1,100 who had not been infected. Out of the reports of 200 different symptoms, here are the 12 that will help researchers distinguish patients who likely have long COVID compared to those who feel symptoms like this because of different conditions. Here's the list: post-exertion malaise, fatigue, brain fog, dizziness, gastrointestinal problems, heart palpitations, issues with sexual desire or capacity, loss of smell or taste, thirst, chronic cough, chest pain, abnormal movements. In our story last night, the two people we talked with who are suffering from long COVID, they experienced a number of those symptoms, and many of you got in touch with us as well. Sue wrote in to tell us, "I caught COVID-19 September of 2020. I haven't been right since. I was able to go back to work, but it took a long time to get my strength back up. I still have brain fog. I get diarrhea or vomit at any time and for no reason. I now have congestive heart failure. It really sucks." Thanks for your segment on long COVID.
I lost my job back in September of last year because of long COVID, and it's been a struggle. It's been just a real struggle. All the symptoms mentioned on TV are very real, and it's amazing how many people still think that you're just being lazy, that you just don't want to do anything. But thank you guys for highlighting this illness and this continued problem with COVID. And thanks for letting people know that COVID is not over. It's just in a different form right now.
And thanks for your message, Everett. And Connie emailed us, "I have dealt with it myself for over 3 years, much like people in your story. I don't recognize myself in my life. I was once an extremely active person traveling all over the world, and now I can barely do anything and struggle to stay working at least part-time. At least hearing about it on the news still gives me hope that we have not been forgotten."
Thank you, thank you, thank you for addressing the long COVID subject. I have had a similar autoimmune disease, chronic fatigue disease, for 25 years now. I have been suffering these symptoms that you described in the article and have been clearly hopeless. But now I see that they are working on it, and perhaps there is a future.
Thanks for your message, Annette. We'll end with this email that we got from Stephanie. "Thanks for doing the special on long COVID this evening, especially right now as the world moves on and pretends the pandemic is over, ignoring the millions of us who have been left disabled by mild infections." She said her parents have struggled to understand her symptoms until they saw our story. Something finally clicked for them to see this described on the news, to know that it is a thing that can happen after COVID and that I'm not crazy or just a weird case. I hope it reached those suffering, their families and their doctors, as well as those who have dropped all COVID precautions, thinking there is nothing left to fear. Thanks for your message. And we're not advocating for you to live in fear like it's the summer of 2020 all over again, but you should recognize that for thousands of Oregonians, maybe your family, friends, or neighbors, COVID-19 is still a very real threat to their well-being. Coming up next on The Story, it's a public safety concern we hear from Portlanders all too often. When you dial 911 during an emergency, can you count on police or an ambulance to respond in a reasonable amount of time? We've shown you how ambulance response times are dismal in Multnomah County, and a recent hit and run highlights a worst-case scenario. Details when The Story returns. Tonight we have concerning new details on the slow emergency response to a serious crash in Northeast Portland back in April. A man in a wheelchair was hit by a driver who took off. Firefighters got there within 4 minutes and did what they could to stabilize the man as they all waited for an ambulance and waited some more and continued to wait as the man lay there dying. After a little over a half an hour, the AMR ambulance finally got there, but the man was dead. The case highlights something that we've been covering for months. Ambulance response times have fallen off, and in Multnomah County, ambulance provider AMR is failing to meet county standards. This time, firefighters are sharing their frustration, saying this is not acceptable.
Without a doubt, if you have an ambulance on that call, when the call comes in, you at least give that person the benefit of the doubt. You at least give that person the ability to have a chance to live.
So frustrating. Investigative reporter Evan Watson uncovered the details on this case through public records requests. He joins me now in the studio. I guess, Evan, it's impossible to say if the outcome would have been different if an ambulance was there right away, but man, it sure highlights the dangers.
Yeah, it really does. And AMR got back to me this afternoon with a statement saying they're looking into this case to better understand what happened, and they're committed to responding in a timely manner. But we know from our past reports on this that AMR is dealing with staffing shortages of paramedics, and they point to that challenge in getting paramedics, retaining them, hiring them, keeping them on staff as why they're dealing with so many slower response times. But this is the product of that, the concern, right?
And is it because they have to have two paramedics in the ambulance?
Two paramedics in the ambulance is what AMR says is part of the issue, although that's been the case for decades now here in Multnomah County.
Is this the only incident like this?
And that's the other interesting part. I got a database just this morning from BOEC, the Bureau of Emergency Communications, that shows all the level 0 cases when there's no ambulance available for that. Now I'm still working through that data. It's a spreadsheet. I'm trying to get rid of duplicates. I want to make sure I'm completely accurate on that. But there's more to come here, and it shows a lot of level 0 cases already this year, meaning that someone calls 911, there's no ambulance available. The fire department and the firefighters are there handling it themselves. And then whenever an ambulance gets available, they'll be there, but not within the time that they're supposed to be.
Wow, we got to get a handle on this one. All right, thank you, Evan.
Thanks,
appreciate it. Still to come on the story, some positivity to close out this Thursday. For more than a half century, a Northeast Portland studio has been home to a unique teacher who specializes in a unique instrument, the accordion. How the studio has a distant connection to the hit TV show The Simpsons, when the story returns.
Straight ahead at 6:30, we're following breaking news of a shooting in North Portland. We'll have the latest from the scene. Plus, preparing for the next heat dome, how the city's working with neighborhood groups to prevent heat-related deaths. Details next at 6:30. We hope to see you then.
For more than 60 years, a small Portland music studio has been teaching people to play an instrument that really does not get a whole lot of love, the accordion. But one family's love for the instrument has now been passed from mother and daughter to anyone who wants to learn. As you might imagine, the stories that come out of that living room music space are as interesting as the instrument itself. Catherine Cook and photographer Nick Bieber take us to class in tonight's Pacific Storyland.
They say practice makes perfect.
It's okay. There you go.
But no one likes cliches, especially accordion players.
Like it's a nerdy instrument. But you know what? It's a go-getter, man. It's like, you know, some of the nicest, happiest people I've seen are accordion players.
Diane Hagan might as well be an accordion. Her joy for this instrument began before she was even born, thanks to her mom.
I think it was because I was in her stomach for 9 months and she was teaching.
Eileen Hagan opened this Northeast Portland studio in 1961, though she started teaching when she was 17.
She was kind and she just loved people and people loved her.
Her name is still on the sign, but the studio belongs to Diane now.
Because I love to see people happy. It makes people happy. I love to play and make them happy.
Diane's been doing just that since she was 2.5 years old. That's when she started playing the accordion.
I'm 3. I'm Diane.
As a toddler, Diane performed on local TV shows.
Here is 3-year-old Diane Hagan to sing and play.
One of the shows starred a clown named Rusty Nails. Rusty, wouldn't you know it, was the inspiration for Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons.
My mom has somehow got me on TV with him.
Surely, if these walls could talk, they'd probably just play the accordion.
It's such a historical place. When I first walked in, it was like, blew my mind.
Last summer, Russ Johnson decided he wanted to learn the accordion. He found Diane, and the rest is history. His own.
I wanted to do something to carry on my dad's legacy. He meant a lot to me. Yeah, he was a truck driver for 45 years, and my dad was a very simple man. But the accordion is hard to play, and he did it.
Russ's dad passed away in June. This was his accordion. As Russ learns to play it, photos like this one come to life.
Sits at my desk, and I always give it a kiss to my dad. Practice.
Those feelings are not lost on Diane. Her mom passed 3 years ago, though dementia stole her away long before that.
I had grieved her for years before she passed, and so when she did, it's like I was kind of ready for that, and it lifted everything off of me.
Now, when Diane plays, she can hear her mom again.
Yeah, she's always in my heart. She's like right here with me. It's like I feel her. Yeah, it's amazing.
Somewhere in heaven, there's a choir backed by 2 new accordionists.
Yeah.
Both awfully proud of their kids.
Very. Accordion changes lives. That's what I tell her.
Start there.
Back here on Earth, you still gotta practice. And while it may not make perfect,
yes,
better,
it doesn't get much better than this. In Northeast Portland, Catherine Cook, KGW News.
What a sweet story. I know a lot of people that play guitar. I don't think I know a single person that plays the accordion. So that was neat to see. By the way, Catherine would love to hear your ideas for her Pacific Storyland series. You can text her. The number is 503-226-5088 or email pacificstoryland@kgw.com. That's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. We'd like to thank, before we leave, Heidi for her email last night. She wrote in to say, I've been watching the story since the pandemic began. Excellent information and research and storytelling. I appreciate the format, and my children actually were interested, who are in their 20s. Thank you for giving clear and honest reporting. Please keep up the good work. It is truly appreciated in this time where I feel like the news can often be partisan and filled with misinformation. Thanks so much, Heidi. Tell your kids to tell their friends. We'd love to have more 20-year-olds with us. And the more people that join us on the story, the more informed we can all be about the issues and the solutions that one way or another affect all of our lives. So remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.